seeing it's now 5 o'clock, and I'll go ahead and call the October 7th, 2019 Land Use and Transportation Committee to order. So before we start with public comment, I just wanted to, we're obviously televising these. Everyone in the room obviously knows that now, but for those that are watching for the first time, I just wanted to let you know that these meetings are a little more informal, and you can certainly tell by our dress. We've got Councilmember Johnson and Tran, and Councilmember Tran was nice enough to wear a tie. I wore a coat, and it's okay. But it's definitely more informal, and our intention is really to have more of a free-flowing conversation. Obviously, we still have the Robert's Rules of Orders, but we're a little less constrained by those, just from the standpoint that we have a good working relationship. Just for a point of order, just to make sure everyone understands, we do have committee members or council members that will attend these meetings. My practice as chair has been to call on the committee members first, though, before going on to the council members. So you should always know that I will defer to them first with any questions before we move on. And with that, look forward to having more engagement from the community for these meetings in the future as a result of these meetings being televised. And again, we appreciate your interest in the city and the good work that we're trying to do here. So with that, I am going to start with public comment. So, Dana Holloway, you are the one and only. Let's see what you got.
Good evening. My name is Dana Holloway, and my question actually is on agenda item B, where we are going to be applying for a grant for the City Housing Action Plan. And I was sort of talking to Doc before the meeting started, so I might have my answer, and during the presentation, if he wants to add anything else, that'd be great. I was just trying to clarify that we'd be hiring a consultant who would be putting together the housing action plan so that we would meet our comprehensive 2023 requirement to satisfy Growth Management Act.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Dana, thank you. Okay, now on to committee business. The first order of business is approval of the minutes from the September 9th, 2019 meeting. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the minutes from September 9th, 2019.
Second.
All right. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion carries unanimously. So on we go, and Doc Hanson, we're going to start with the authorization to apply for the State Department of Commerce grant in support of developing a city housing action plan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, Doc Hanson, Planning Manager. I wanted to give you a little background on this. What's being requested is for the go-ahead on for the application. 1 month ago, well, first of all, in the background, I think you see in the one-page report, Senate House Bill 1923 was passed, which allocates $5 million for the development of housing action grants throughout the state of Washington. A maximum amount of grant for each city with more than 20,000 for up to $100,000 is eligible for that amount. 1 month ago, there were a lot of stipulations in the bill that were going to make it very difficult criteria to meet, particularly in timeline. And there were a number of people within the Department of Commerce who is administering this grant that I was getting in touch with to try to move this timeline. I was successful in getting that timeline moved in the middle of September, but because if we didn't get that timeline moved, we weren't even going to apply for it. There were also a number of cities that where we feel it's going to be useful to the city and also the region in terms of combining their efforts. A certain amount of this money would actually go to combining their efforts to draw up a regional, what we're calling a housing model. And we didn't even know if we were going to apply for this based upon the timelines that the Department of Commerce were placing on it. I was able to convince the director of the Department of Commerce to move this date back, and we had about 2 weeks to apply for the grant. So it was due October 30th. If I waited for the first LUTC, we wouldn't be able to apply. So I did this to apply for the $100,000, and what I'm up here to do is to ask for your blessing and putting it on the consent agenda so that it can be passed by the council on a consent agenda at the next council meeting. If we are awarded this grant, it would be by the end of October, so we would be able to provide you information regarding the grant and what elements of the housing action plan we would actually be going into, so that the council would have the opportunity to accept or reject the grant as being offered.
Thank you, Doc. I just want to say that both Doc and Brian contacted me as the chair of this committee to let me know of their intention to apply for this. They went through the backstory, and I think that, as a council, we certainly have the prerogative to deny acceptance of the grant. But I think to miss the opportunity entirely to entertain the possibility of getting that grant was something I didn't think we needed to rely on normal process to do. So what I asked is that, or I agreed, was that it'd be best for them to move forward with that application process and allow the council to weigh in when and if we receive that grant. So I think that as far as the process is concerned, it was done with consultation. It was just done a little differently. But Doc, I appreciate the fact that you're here, and the committee, if you have any questions. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And that was kind of my question, was just around, will the council have an opportunity to weigh in on policy, vision, I guess, mission as it relates to housing once the grant is applied
Correct.
for and received?
Yes, thank you. Yes, it's coming back to the council. I would put the grant before you so that you could see the action that we that we put into place when I hit the button to send at 3:45 on the day it was due. So you will be able to see all of that, and I will be making a much greater presentation in terms of what that means at the time if we do receive the grant. We have a feeling that we may be able to be in the higher ranks of receiving this because there's a number of cities that are trying to work together. Tukwila, Grant, Auburn, Berrien, ourselves are working together to try to create a regional model, which will give us a population of about 500,000 people rather than the individual. So we would have a voice with King County rather than just Seattle. We would be the second largest region, actually, in addressing housing issues within the county of King. So a certain portion of this grant, if we receive it, would go towards, everybody would be chipping in to create this kind of a model, which would be very useful for decision makers. So we went forward and said, yeah, we'll do this. We're going to go back to our councils and see if they'll accept it.
Thanks, Doc.
Any additional questions? Deputy Mayor Honda?
Thank you. Are there any dangers in applying for a grant, being awarded the grant, and then denying the grant, saying
No.
that we don't want it?
No. We would find reasons. I'd find out the reasons for that. We could justify the reasons. I don't, knowing the Department of Commerce and working with the Department of Commerce for the last 20 years, they will accept these reasons and rejections of any of these grants. They got a lot of people that want them. So
Okay.
they're not going to, they're saying, well, they didn't want this, so we'll never ask them again. We'll have valid reasons as to why we would reject the grant.
Okay, thank you very much.
And they would be your objections.
Okay, thanks.
Good. Any additional questions? Hearing none, do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move to forward authorization to community development to apply for monies from the State Department of Commerce to the October 15, 2019 consent agenda for approval.
Second?
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion carries unanimously.
Thank
Thank you, Doc. Next, we have John Mulkey. John's got two subjects. The first is Complete Streets ADA upgrades, a 30% design report. The second is going to be the horizontal curb warning signs at 30% design report. We'll go ahead and start with Complete Streets. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Chair Copang, council members and committee members. My name is excuse me, John Wolke. I'm a senior capital engineer for the city. I'm presenting the Complete Streets ADA upgrades, 30% design status, and authorization to bid with the 2020 overlay project. This is just a brief overview of the area of the thing. This is the intersection of South 320th Street and SR 99, and the areas of the impact we'll be working on in these corners where the ADA upgrades will take place. The policy question is, should the City Council authorize staff to proceed with the design of the Complete Streets ADA upgrades and now allow the Complete Streets project to be bid under the 2020 asphalt overlay project and return to the LUTC and council at 85% design completion for further reports and authorization? So financial impacts is included in the capital budget under Project 222. It's partially funded by the TIB with a grant of $100,000 and the remainder with city funds. Ongoing costs associated with operation and maintenance will be performed and funded through street and traffic maintenance that's already existing because it's just replacement of existing facilities. Background information, this project will replace existing non-compliant curb ramps and other pedestrian facilities at the intersection of South 320th Street and SR 99 and bring them into compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act as part of the city's effort to comply with our submitted ADA transition plan. The request to include this as part of the 2020 overlay project as a separate schedule, and based on the type of work this is, we don't believe it would be a good to bid out by itself, but to combine this with the overlay project, which has similar work in preparation for overlay, then we think we'd get a better price on this to go along with the other type of work that goes with it. And so our status is at 30%, which we've completed survey, field review, project design at 30%, and reviewing our SEPA exemption because of pedestrian project. And ongoing are bringing this project to 85%, contract specifications and plans to 85%. So funding-wise, our estimated expenditures, including survey, in-house design, 2020 construction, contingency, and construction management by city staff, are $199,932, and our available funding with the $100,000 grant and city funding is $200,000. So we have available funding for the project. So after receiving the bids, the total project cost will be refined and presented to the committee and council for bid and award authorization. And again, we anticipate bidding this project in February with the 2020 asphalt overlay project, and construction of the project is anticipated to begin in the spring and with substantial completion in the summer of 2020. So the options considered are authorize staff to proceed with the design of the Complete Streets ADA upgrades, allow the Complete Streets project to be bid under the 2020 asphalt overlay project and return to the LUTC and council at 85% design completion for further reports and authorization. Or two, do not authorize staff to proceed with this project and provide direction to staff. The mayor recommends forwarding option one to the October 15th City Council consent agenda for approval, and I'm available for any questions.
All right. Hearing none from the committee, Deputy Mayor Honda.
Thank you. Can you tell me exactly what ADA improvements will be made? Or
Sure.
upgrades?
Well, when we went out and reviewed the site, the ramps are deficient, the push buttons are deficient, the signs are deficient, the pergolas are within the areas of the ramp, so there's a whole lot to bring that up to standards. We'll have to modify the ramps, placement of signs, and placement of push buttons at basically every ramp location to bring
So
them up to standard.
Will the design of the pergolas and the seating be changed? or
No, we'll work around that to maintain the pergola. I'll have to modify the ramp in front that come up really close to it, but we'll still maintain the pergola itself. We won't be impacting the area in front of it. I'll just have to work around that to maintain it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, John, one observation I've had there is that with the ramps being set as far back, or the sidewalks or the crosswalks being set as far back from that corner, sometimes people either making that right turn don't necessarily see the pedestrians. So it's as far as just having some kind of additional signal that makes sure that people know there's something in the crosswalk. I don't know what that would look like, but I think that.
That's a tough question because there's a lot of intersections that we have that issue where a green light and a walk signal, I mean, we basically the person turning right is supposed to be looking ahead and noticing that a
Yes.
walk signal is on and that a pedestrian's at that intersection.
Yes,
And there's multiple places when we get larger intersections like that, and that's with those multiple lanes, it tends to spread those intersections and pushes those people out to the side.
yeah,
And I know that there's that issue, and I know that our traffic division is aware of that issue. I don't know what kind of signals and changes to be involved with that. This, right now, in this project, is not going into the signal operation, it's more of an ADA, and so to get into changing the signals and the locations of the ramps or adding some kind of additional signaling is kind of beyond the scope of what this is doing.
fair enough, but I think once we've got it torn up, there's other things we can do while we're there. And that's, that may be a whole nother issue, it is another issue, and I see we got Rick Perez, our
Yeah.
senior
Okay.
traffic engineer, was going to weigh in.
So, some time ago, we presented our local road safety plan,
Yeah.
and that identified this particular issue. So we will be implementing a leading pedestrian interval at 99 and
That's right.
312.
Yeah, we
So,
talked about that, that's good.
haven't gotten around to that yet, but it's coming, and if nothing else, we would implement it at the same time we're implementing the adaptive
Is
traffic
that
control
about
system.
5 seconds?
Yeah, we'll have to look at it, but typically, we would provide 5 seconds of the walk signal before the traffic that would conflict with that would be released.
Good. Well, I think giving anybody in a wheelchair a little head start certainly can only be helpful, I think, at this point. So it's considering the size of the intersection. So, Rick, thank you for that. And then just for complete clarity, this is transportation impact funds,
I believe so.
not general funds.
Yeah, we can go back to
So not
the-
be used for anything other than
Transportation.
this nature. So,
Yes, I had it in there.
yes, you did.
Yep, traffic impact fees.
Yep, traffic impact fees. Okay, all right.
All
Thank you,
right.
John. Do we have any additional questions? Hearing none, do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move to forward option 1 to the October 15th, 2019 consent agenda for approval.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, good. So motion passed unanimously. Now on to horizontal curve warnings.
Horizontal curve warning signs, and this is the 30% design status for this project. So this is just a picture of the idea of this is an extreme example, and pictures of this kind of signs that we'll be putting up and looking at where we have curve issues and stuff like that within the city. So the policy question is, should the city council authorize staff to proceed with the design of the horizontal curve warning signs and return to LUTC and council at 85% design completion for further reports and authorization? This project was included as projected to be completed within the approved budget under Capital Project 218. Is funded by a grant from the FHWA in the amount of $519,700 and the remainder in city funds. Upon completion of the project, ongoing costs associated with operation and maintenance will be performed and funded through traffic sign maintenance. And funding requirements for operation and maintenance of infrastructure is reviewed and adjusted as required during the budget process. So this project will collect data, determine and install the appropriate signage to upgrade the current MUTC standard curve warning signs citywide. MUTCD is the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. It's a nationwide. So the project status, currently the design is at 30%, which includes, we've completed our ball bank study, determined which curves require signage, determined if appropriate signage is being worked on, bringing it to 30%, SEPA exemption review, and then ongoing tasks is bringing the project to 85%, finishing the specifications and the plans to 85%. Funding and expenditures, estimated expenditures including the ball bank study designed by consultant, 2020 construction costs, construction contingency, and construction management is $521,520, and available funding with our federal grant of $519,700 and city funds of $4,600. We have a total project cost available $524 with a surplus of $2,700. So after receiving bids, the total project cost will be again refined and presented to the committee and council for bid award authorization. And we anticipate bidding this project in March of 2020 with construction anticipated in the spring and completion in the summer. So option, consider or authorize staff to proceed with design of the horizontal curve warning signs and return to the LUTC and council at 85% design completion for further reports and authorization. Or 2, do not authorize staff to proceed with the project and provide direction to staff. And Mayor recommends forwarding option 1 to the October 15, 2019 City Council consent agenda.
Okay.
And I'm available for questions on this project.
Good. Thank you, John. Any questions from the committee? And again, when we talk about city funds, we're not talking about general funds. In this case, we're talking about Capital Street Fund transfers.
Correct.
So I just don't want there to be any confusion on the part of anybody. There's a lot of different funds underneath the umbrella of the city. In this case, though, we are using road funding. So, all right. Unless there's any additional questions. You have a motion?
Yes, I do, Mr. Chair. I move to forward option 1 to the October 15, 2019 consent agenda for approval.
Second?
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion carries unanimously. John, thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
your presentation. I look forward to seeing you at 85%. All right, next we have Christine Mullen talking about the Lakehaven Interlocal Agreement at South Dash Point Road Sidewalk Project.
Yes. Good evening. As I said, I'm Christine Mullen. I'm a senior capital engineer for the city, and I'm here to discuss the Lakehaven Water and Sewer Interlocal Agreement for the South Dash Point Road Sidewalk Project. The policy question is, should the city council authorize the mayor to execute the interlocal agreement, which I will refer to probably as ILA, between the city of Federal Way and Lakehaven for the South Dash Point Road Sidewalk Project? And I was here last month for the 85% approval and authorization to bid for this project, but just to remind you, the capital project is to construct a sidewalk on the south side of Dash Point Road between, basically along the frontage of Sacagawea, but from the church there to the first phase of the sidewalk that was done a couple years ago. So Lakehaven has requested the city enter into an ILA. The reason for that is with our project, we're having our new proposed sidewalk, and at the back of the sidewalk for most of the project, we will have a retaining wall, and Lakehaven's existing water line is directly under that retaining wall. So we've told them they need to move that water line. It's going to be moved out into the roadway, and so rather than disrupt the area with construction twice, they've said, hey, can we just work with you guys to have a separate bid schedule to do the work at the same time? So by doing that, we should be able to reduce the costs for everybody and also the extended public disruption. The estimated cost of the interlocal agreement is just over $370,000. It's $308,000 for the estimated construction costs, 15% construction management, 5% project administration. Now, these costs are based on the estimate that has been prepared at this time by Lakehaven for their work. And so we have formulas included in the ILA, so then those costs will be based on the actual costs when bids are opened. So the options for consideration are, 1, authorize the mayor to execute the interlocal agreement between the City of Federal Way and Lakehaven for the South Dash Point Road Sidewalk Project, or 2, do not authorize the mayor to execute the ILA between the City of Federal Way and Lakehaven Water and Sewer District for the South Dash Point Road Sidewalk Project and provide direction to staff. The mayor's recommendation is to forward option 1 to the October 15th consent agenda for approval. And any questions?
Committee members, any questions? Yes, Councilmember Tran.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Christine. I just have a question. I think I heard you said that the estimated cost is $372,922.91. Now, if for some reasons the actual cost is more than this, are we liable to
No.
pay the difference? No.
No, the way the agreement is written is we have these costs in there as an example, just to show how it would be calculated, but it would be the cost for Lakehaven's Schedule B items for all their water line work. Then we have some items which are, we're calling them shared bid items, for things like traffic control, mobilization, that would apply to the whole project. So when we open bids and get those actual costs from the contractor, then we would calculate the exact amount of what the agreement would be.
Thank you.
Good. Any further questions? Hearing none, do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move to forward option 1 to the October 15th, 2019 City Council consent agenda for approval.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay, motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Christine, thank you. And then we have, let's see here, what do we have next? We have Naveen Chandra, Senior Capital Engineer, talking about the Neighborhood Traffic Safety Program and the bid results.
Good evening,
have you here.
Chair Kopang and members of the council. I'm here to present 2019-2021 Neighborhood Traffic Safety NTS Program bid results. Policy question: should the City Council authorize staff to reject the bid for 2019-2021 Neighborhood Traffic Safety Program and return to the LUTC and Council for bid award, further reports, and authorization after rebidding the project? Background information. We received one bid from Asphalt Patch Systems Inc. out of Puyallup, Washington on September 17th for the project. The bid received for the comparable bid items are much higher, almost 109% increase over the previous contract. Here is the comparison of the bid results from the previous year. So, for example, in 2016-17, for the speed hump, it was $2,700. This time we got $3,000. Similarly, for the traffic circle, previous year was $8,200, whereas this year we got it as $18,700. Similarly, if you go through the rest of the bid items, it averages out almost 109% over the previous year. So there are no known market factors that would explain the extreme increase in pricing. Acceptance of one bid means fewer work items per project could be funded, and fewer neighborhood safety project would be undertaken within the annual $30,000 operating budget for the contract work. Options considered: authorize staff to reject the bid for 2019-2021 Neighborhood Traffic Safety Program and return to the LUTC and Council for bid award, further reports, and authorization after rebidding the project. Option 2 would be do not authorize staff to bid this project and provide the direction to the staff. Mayor recommends forwarding option 1 to the October 15th, 2019 City Council consent agenda for approval. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Committee, any questions? I do have one. I did talk to EJ, but I think it'd be good for everyone to understand. Do we think we're going to have a better chance of getting more competitive bids by putting this out to bid at some point in the near future?
We are hoping so. Maybe if we wait like a couple months after the holidays, maybe that's when people will start lining up for work for the next year.
Okay.
Maybe we'll get more competition at that time.
Okay.
Or
Yeah.
we may consider different type of bidding.
Okay. So we're looking at some different options.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Any additional questions? Hearing none, do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move to forward option 1 to October 15, 2019 consent agenda for approval.
Second?
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Motion carries unanimously. Naveen?
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Next we have Leah Myrie.
Hello.
We're going to talk about the information on the proposed assessment for the role of the district for North Lake, correct? North Lake
Yes, we
Management
are.
District. Yeah, okay.
The ongoing process is here.
Yes, yes.
Good evening, Committee Chair Kopang, Deputy Mayor Honda, council members, engaged members of the public. Thank you, Dana, for being here. I am speaking tonight on behalf of the North Lake Management District. I am the Water Quality Coordinator, Leah Myrie, for the city, and do facilitate this renewal process on their behalf. I did want to have this info session this evening with the committee in anticipation of the upcoming public hearing on the assessments scheduled for November 5th. So instead of giving it to you guys a day before, I decided a month was a little better. So.
Thank you.
Sure thing. So a little bit on the renewal process to date. As you know, I have been here pretty much all year, and most recently, we had at the October 1st council meeting the adoption of the ordinance renewing the Lake Management District, so that's fantastic. Sadly, that's about only 60 to 70% of the way complete with the process. So now we are looking, that ordinance also set a public hearing on the assessment role for the district for November 5th. So a brief review of what that ordinance contained basically sets out the duration of the new Lake Management District, which is the next 10 years starting in 2020, the purpose of that district, which is to keep North Lake nice and healthy, the boundary, which we'll discuss a little more in depth a few slides in the future, and most importantly, the funding mechanism, because everyone cares about how much money they'll be paying into their fund. So I wanted to discuss a little bit about how those assessments are calculated. So again, just to revisit kind of the basics here, the Lake Management District is a special purpose district set up through King County. And so how it is funded is through the affected property owners around the lake. So anyone with lakefront footage is determined to be an affected property owner, and each of them will pay into the general fund annually to basically fund all of the activities of the Lake Management District, including aquatic vegetation management, education and outreach, and so on. So if you're wondering how these are calculated, it is based on property type. Let me fix that. Property type multiplied by the rate, which can differ based on the property type, which we'll get into, and that will equal the annual assessment. So how does payment occur? Again, I will go into a lot more of these details during the public hearing, but basically every February, staff, myself, grabs the spreadsheet of all the parcels. We send that into King County for everything that's in the 2021 and beyond that will be subject to a CPI increase. So we do that calculation, send it into King County. They send all the bills, these special assessments out to the property owners, and then they need to pay it by May 10th. And I will go into what delinquent assessments and that kind of, all of that, what that entails in the public hearing, just so that any members of the public who are interested in that can know what that process looks like. So again, the assessments, if you remember, it's based on property type times rate equals assessment. So we have 5 different property types in North Lake. We have mostly, it's single-family residential, developed. Then we have single-family residential that has lake access, but isn't necessarily waterfront. Then single-family residential that is vacant property with lakefront footage. Then we have all of the commercial property now owned by IRG, and the Department of Fish and Wildlife boat launch. So all of these are treated differently. As seen here in this lovely assessment rate structure table, so we've got all of the property types from the single-family residential all the way down to Department of Fish and Wildlife, and then we're looking at rate. So for developed property, this is based on a per unit set cost. For vacant property and for commercial property, it is based on per lakefront foot. And then for the Department of Fish and Wildlife, that is just a single assessment each year that does not have a special rate other than the CPI index increase. So we're looking at a total annual assessment of just over $15,000 for the new district, with an estimated balance carryover about 12 grand. So we're looking at some good reserves to bring into the new district for some expanded activities. So as I mentioned, now this differs from the Steel Lake Management District that is not subject to CPI increases. But North Lake did decide in their past LMD for the 2010 through 2019 to have the CPI inflation put into their annual assessments, and they decided to do that again this time. So these increases are not to exceed 5% in any given year, and the average over the last 10 years was about 1.9%, and in the last 5 years, that has actually raised to about 2.34%, and that is based on the Seattle Consumer Price Index. So we'll get to see a little bit more. So again, this table's a little not visually accessible, but we'll get into a table here soon. So I just wanted to basically do an analysis of what the initial assessment was for the North Lake LMD from 2010, what the current assessment was, so what property owners were paying this year for their assessment, and then for the proposed assessment in 2020, what that looks like. So for instance, single-family developed unit, this year was paying about $121, and for 2020, they'll be paying $125. So it's not a huge jump in prices here. So here is a table here's a chart representing all of those figures in that table that is a little bit more accessible, and I'm going to provide some percentage increases here as well. So looking at basically the red bars here is what property owners were paying this year, and then the green is representative of what they will be paying in the spring under the proposed assessment roll. So again, it's not a huge jump. This is in total. And so, again, there is not a huge jump in what these proposed assessments are. So hopefully we won't have property owners that are upset by the new assessment figures. So we are holding a public hearing on the assessments that is required by RCW code. It is set for November 5th. Again, that entails the staff presentation along with citizen comment to give the public a chance to speak on this issue. I will also at that time be forwarding a resolution for council that will, if the public hearing goes well, that you can choose to make a motion to approve and confirm the special assessment roll, at which time then I will transfer that into an ordinance and bring it to LUTC in December. So the notice timeline, so in October, so mid-October, I will be doing all of the public notice requirements per RCW code, which basically includes notices in the paper as well as notices to all of the affected property owners as well. Basically, the content is just about when the public hearing is, what the total amount of assessments will be, what the individual assessment is for each of the properties, how they can object to this if they have an objection, and where they can see that assessment roll if they are wondering what that will be. So the next steps, again, we'll have the public hearing on November 5th. If all goes well, we'll have the resolution that will transfer to the ordinance in December, first reading, second reading, and then to appointment of the advisory committee next spring. And I welcome any questions from the committee.
Thank you, Leah, for the presentation. Quick question for you. This looks like the state's funding goes down in 2020 from 2019. And I was looking at that bar chart.
Oh, Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Yes.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Yes. It did. So the Department of Fish and Wildlife has a single annual assessment. And so that began in 2010 as a $4,000 assessment, which is then subject to that CPI increase annually, which is why their payment was just under $5,000 this year. However, while we were setting up the petition, myself on behalf of the Lake Management District and the Advisory Committee, we do have a representative from the Department of Fish and Wildlife who sits on the committee. He did say, based on funding limitations within the Department of Fish and Wildlife, for them to more fully be on board with the Lake Management District, they were not very amenable to any increase in that assessment, and so instead of lowering it, they wanted a much lower assessment. For some lake management districts, they have maybe a $2,000, $3,000 assessment, and basically the committee and this representative came to a compromise that, okay, let's just start it back to what it was in 2010 when the first lake management district was initiated, and so that was kind of the compromise they made for buy-in along the process with the Lake Management District. For instance, the Department of Fish and Wildlife they did vote to renew the Lake Management District. They also signed the petition to renew the Lake Management District, two things that were that set up the property owners with a much better chance of renewal based on the fact that we had a bit of a wild card with IRG holding so much property that they had such a high vote count. that they were really crucial in that process. So this was kind of a compromise between the other committee members and then the Department of Fish and Wildlife to revert that back.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
I knew there was a backstory.
Yes.
Thank you, Leah. Okay, any additional questions from the committee? Hearing none, do I have a motion? No, there's no motion.
There's no motion. This is just for fun.
This is for fun. Leah, thank you. I do appreciate you coming in a little early so we could be,
Oh, sure.
ask all the tough questions.
Yeah.
I guess the really important so. Oh,
Yeah, thank you for
Councilmember
coming in
Moore.
a month in
Yeah.
advance
Yeah.
and briefing us on this.
Oh, sure, absolutely. I don't anticipate too much dissension for the public hearing. I know there have been a few comments made by some of the property owners, but I think more of that is in line with how money was spent from the Lake Management District for the previous 10 years, rather than the assessments that they'll be paying in the future. So I don't anticipate too many issues on this.
well, we do have a community that's very involved in the process, and they're all neighbors, so they talk to each other, so.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
All right, Leah, thank you.
thanks.
Good. Okay, with that then, I think we'll finish up then with a presentation on the report of the progress of aircraft issues by Bill Vedino, who is an advisor to the mayor.
There's a handout coming for you all, too.
Oh, good.
Promised handout.
Just want to commend Bill in public here. I think Yarden Weidenfeld certainly created a high level of confidence in the part of the community with his engagement. And with him leaving, there was some concern that, who's this Bill guy, and is he going to be like our Yarden was? Well, Bill's done a great job, and I'm hearing good things from the community members that are engaged. So Bill, thank you for your service to the city and for taking this up so effectively.
Excuse me, is there a copy for our guest in the audience?
Yes.
Thank you.
How did you got them? That's my Dana Holloway copy.
All right.
She and I are on an email string, too. So,
Not that that would be an expectation we would have for every future meeting, but since Dana's here, and we have one.
Well, she's
right,
very
we go.
involved in this issue, so.
she's very,
of
very
course,
much
but
involved.
yes, absolutely.
And I've got a list of at least 10 people since we did the study on, with the
Yes.
Department of Commerce, and it's growing and growing, so we can keep them. And that's part of one of the recommendations is we grow that even more.
Good.
But just briefly, we'll always update you on the Highline Forum, okay? Lydia couldn't go, but she was staying in communication with me, and they did their start update and discussion, and of course, they reiterated what we reiterated before and for. Again, it was approved by the Department of Redundancy Department. Yes, there is the glide slope issue getting solved in 4 years. The third runway agreement of trying not to run that as much at night, if at all. The late night noise program that's starting, which we'll keep an eye on whether we're on start or not. Their departure noise abatement research, their ground noise analysis, and their federal policy working group. So they gave that update. And then there were crickets. Any questions? And so then I said, well, is there an update on the suspended start cities and the process going forward? And then Lance Little, who's a great guy, he also came to Taste of Federal Way after coming to Flavor Federal Way. He said, yes, we will be reaching out, probably with a commissioner and a staff member to come meet with the city. So I just checked on that today, and that's still being worked on. So we'll see what happens there, but there will be outreach to the 3 cities. There was a South King County Fund update, and after Lydia and I and other people had raised questions about, well, what if we did the ultrafine study with the $750,000 in this fiscal year, or this year? What if we did census? What if we did some of the other things? Well, they said, well, we need to finish our outreach to all the people in the South County to make sure that these funds are allocated equitably. So there'll be no allocation this year. And what was going on was they weren't going to spend it on all these ideas we had. They had a backlog, and then they realized that, we better just listen to everybody first. So that will happen, that $10 million will start to get spent then, and then we'll have a process where we're in the game and we can take care of that. They did an update on something that 3 cities get to take care of because they're ecological and they're environmental and they're around the airport supporting environmental projects. You know, you've got fuel being dumped, things that don't happen here, but I think someday this ACE fund, as I researched that for you, probably could be tapped for what's happening, what's falling from the skies for us. So I'll keep you updated on that. And then there was a dialogue about what's happening with the suspended cities. And both Burien and Des Moines basically made a presentation, you know, informal, to the Highline Forum during the Q&A of why they left. And it's basically what we've talked about here at LUTC and the council before, too, and what it's going to take to have them be trustworthy again, working together again. So we'll stay tuned for that. And the meeting is every 2 months, but we're going to have to stay engaged because we need updates every 2 months, especially this group. And then, of course, the Department of Commerce study continues. And Dave Berger and I are involved with that, and we'll get you more detail as some salient results come out as they're analyzing all the data. There are a couple meetings in November, which they will let us know about, that we can attend and we can, you know, have our citizens attend, and there'll be great updates there too. And our city staff has been just instant in getting details because they're harvesting existing data about how the South County has changed since 1999 in the third runway and the effects on Federal Way and the other 5 cities. Then, of course, Adam Smith's office continues to stay in touch with us as they build the legislation, and we'll have some verbiage for us to look at, probably send it to you in the next week or 2 as it comes out, so we can be involved with that. And of course, you all are getting back to me about the legislative agenda for the council, and Councilmember Johnson's already gotten back to me on that. And of course, it's an affirmation that, of course, we're going to support Mike Pelliciotti, representative, in reintroducing the mitigation funding for windows, et cetera, for our people here in Federal Way to have it affect them as well, too. And then found out the other day that the FAA Ombudsman has been hired. We have a name. We sort of have a starting date. They should be here any moment. I asked, it was a trick question, but I says, well, when will we be introduced? And they said, well, he'll be introduced to the START group at one of the upcoming meetings. And I said, well, what about the cities that are at START? Can you bring them to the Highline Forum? And so there was this, oh, yes. So anyway, so we will meet them as well, too. But I think we're going to just have to do it on our own. So we have a name, and we're going to start working on that process. And then other developments, John Reesing on Saturday let us know that apparently there will be an October 19th meeting here from the people in DC, from the EPA, to talk about Beacon Hill initiated it. We're invited. I will be going to talk about how to participate, especially as the port moves forward. And apparently with their what they call environmental justice requirements, even a sliver of Federal Way can be eligible, like that now that we have that special computerized way of the planes fly over the same homes every day to sort of minimize the noise for everybody else, we can have an impact zone that's even just part of a neighborhood. So we will work with that, and we have John Reesing to thank with that, and he'll be there with me. And if we can find someone else on the staff who knows, environmental impact learnings even better than I, but we'll figure it out. We'll find a way to do that. And then, of course, Dave Berger was, he might be coming for public comment at the end, but we seem to be finishing. But Marine Hills did send a letter to the Ports Commission. I believe you're all copied on it. If not, we'll get you a copy. But number one, what they did by accelerating the design on that project, which had 3 cities suspend, while it's not a violation, Dave very aptly, as the former city manager said, that was not in the spirit of what we do. And then, of course, they continue, Marine Hills continues to push, and I recommend we do that too, that 4 years for taking the degrees from 2.75 landing over 3-4 right, over I-90 to 3. It should not be 3 degrees in 4 years. And so I think that's something we can work on too, now that we're going direct to the port, that kind of thing too. So anyway, then the other piece, if my slides will, there we go. Sorry about that. Then in front of you is the format of what I call the status report, which I envision you'll have in your packets before the meeting, so you know where we're at. And then basically this presentation I'm giving will be even more focused. And so, and Dana Holloway has a copy of that too. I've reviewed it with Dave Berger, who is on the committee. I haven't had a chance to show it to Chris Hall. Basically, it's subdivided into the first section is what the report enunciated and what the report's goals were. And then as you stretch out, the audience isn't seeing the rest of it, but Dana is, there's the page numbers that refer to what we were talking about and the case that we made. And so this will track where we are on noise impacts, where we are on the cargo flight issue, from the report a year ago, health impacts, environmental review, and then there'll be a new section after military aircraft where I'm going to formulate for you all how do we increase our citizen outreach so that we make sure that on our website that every single citizen knows what the complaint avenues are, okay, beyond the people who appear here. These are the websites you go to, these are the instruments that you get. That we publicize all the resources, you know, that what's going on with the UW, all the other things on ultrafine. And then basically we take this update and we make sure, yes, it's on television, et cetera, but we make sure that we get this out to the citizens as much as possible. Even it means a special listserv on air issues so people know what's going on. For instance, before the Blue Angels are flying, we'll let our neighbors know, by the way, there's going to be some aircraft flying in different places over Federal Way. It's because of the rehearsals, those kinds of issues. So take a look at that, but that's basically going to be our guide, and we can keep adding as I am on the bottom what's there. And then we'll look at what's outstanding. For instance, outstanding still is what do we do about a portable noise monitor, which we have to somehow get into the budget. And then we also have to figure out how to implement it, because I think what stymied that one before I was up at this, in this position was, it's one thing to buy it, it's a lot of investment to monitor it. So it's double, maybe more of the price, but I'm sure we could value engineer that. But as we move it around and we get unassailable data, because that noise monitor was about us having the data to make a case about certain things that are going on beyond the FAA and the port monitors. So anyway, so take a look at that. I like that kind of format. You know, my office is a chart. I have all these charts about how to get somewhere and how to get back. And of course, Councilmember Tran and I are going to spend 2 years doing lean management in Tacoma for the next 2 days. And so there'll be more of that. But I like to sort of say, what are our goals? What are our outcomes? And how do we get it done?
Good.
So,
Well,
based on that, any questions?
no, Bill, thank you for the presentation.
You're welcome.
I just want to say this format's very helpful. I think it's great to have that report and to read it, but to have the reference pages on this spreadsheet really, I think, helps to be able to re-access that information.
And it's got to be tighter, because those are like where the recommendations are. Dave Berger recommended we take it to where the case was made for each one.
Good.
So that'll be even more, but it's a living document, which will be good.
Good,
So-
good, I appreciate that.
And maybe even Dana Holloway approved. She's nodding her head, I love it.
Good, hey.
Good.
Do we have any questions from the committee members? Council members, Deputy Mayor?
Thank you.
All right. Well, Bill, you're getting out pretty easy.
I am.
So anyway, with that, we'll go ahead and conclude. Unless there's any other issues for the good of the order, we'll go ahead and call this meeting to a conclusion. And the next LUTC meeting will be on November 4th, 2019 at 5 p.m. right here in Council Chambers. Thank you.